And welcome to the information session for CultureWorks 2024 Annual Grants Program. At the top of our meeting, I want to share that this session is being recorded and will be available on CultureWorks website within the next week or so. To get things started, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Shelby Finkelstein, and I am the Advancement in Grants Program Strategist here at CultureWorks, and will be here to guide you through the grants process and anything you may need beyond that. And also joining us for today's session is my colleague, Tamia Roberts. She is the Communications and Marketing Specialist, and she is kindly monitoring the chat box. So if we don't get to all questions, she will be able to help me identify those, and you can email me after today's session. And before we just jump in today, I want to give you an overview of today's session, and which will provide you with a summary of the 2024 grants program. So, pardon me while we have some technical difficulties. On the agenda today is a background on CultureWorks, a summary of our grants program, and we'll also have a general Q&A portion at the end of the presentation, but we'll also stop briefly at key points in the presentation to answer questions about specific topics, such as eligibility and focus areas, and again, a general Q&A session at the end. The objective with our time today is to get familiarized with our grant guidelines, the application and grant review process, and hear some strategies for preparing successful proposals. So please feel free to write down or type any questions you may have along the way into the chat box, as again, there will be a general Q&A portion at the end of the session. And for now, I kindly ask that you mute yourself during the presentation, and then please feel free to take that setting off once we get to the various Q&A portions. And with that, we will get started. So to share a little bit about CultureWorks history, we were founded in 2009 to be a champion for arts and culture throughout the greater Richmond and Tri-Cities region. And we define that region as the cities of Richmond, Colonial Heights, Hopewell, and Petersburg, along with the counties of Charles City, Chesterfield, Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, New Kent, and Powhatan, as well as the town of Ashland. So that is our service area, as well as the service area for the grant opportunity. Today, we serve dozens of individual artists and partner with over 200 plus nonprofit arts and culture organizations. Our mission is to strengthen those individual artists and nonprofit arts and culture organizations to increase their impact in our region. And we do this through various means. We deepen arts and culture access to communities with barriers in our region. We increase the capacity of individual artists and small and medium-sized nonprofit organizations. We promote the work of other artists and nonprofits for their inclusive arts and culture experiences and events to the public. And through what we're talking to today, providing grant opportunities to the local arts and culture community. Our CultureWorks grant program provides funding for local practicing artists and nonprofit arts and culture organizations. Funding is made possible through the support of various partners and individuals who join CultureWorks in sustaining and supporting a thriving arts and culture community. This year, we have the Community Foundation for Greater Richmond, Altria, and for cultural equity grants, which we'll jump into what exactly those are. Funding is made possible in part through the National Endowment for the Arts. The NEA last supported us in 2022 through an American Rescue Plan grant, and we're glad to have them supporting us again this year under their General Grants for the Arts project, with $50,000 going into the pot of funds available this year. A key priority of the program is diversity and inclusivity, and this value is interwoven through all of CultureWorks services and programming, and our grants program is just one of the ways that we bring this value to life. We believe that everyone in our community should have access to arts and culture, as well as the opportunity to express their culture through the arts. Here you'll see a snapshot of our annual grants program. From the beginning of the grants program in 2010 to the end of the last cycle in 2023. You'll see number of grants awarded to artists and organizations, as well as the total dollar amounts that have been distributed from 2010. In the bottom right corner, you'll see the range of grant awards that were given in our last cycle. For artists, it ranged from 1,000 to 6,000, and for organizations from 2,500 to $10,000. Now, this changes based on the pot of money that we have available each cycle. So with our infusion of funds from the NEA, we expect to be making somewhat larger grant awards within our limitations. We like to share that CultureWorks is always trying to say yes as much as we can. Although we can't give a grant to everyone, we certainly try to reach as many people as we can. CultureWorks allows artists and organizations that have been awarded annual grants for 2 or more consecutive years to continue applying for another year of funding. However, qualified applicants that have not received a grant receive priority consideration. Now we will talk about the notice of funding opportunity, which is why we're all here today. The guidelines for grants programs for artists and organization are available now on CultureWorks website. And our time today is meant to debrief our grants program, but it certainly does not cover everything we have written in the guidelines. We encourage you to read through those documents, familiarize yourself with the program, and to ask questions ahead of the application deadline. Today, we'll cover things such as the timeline of the grant cycle, focus areas, eligibility, application components, review criteria, terms and conditions, and all other information critical to a successful grant process. To give you a sense of our timeline, applications will open on Thursday, February 1st at 9 a.m., and they will close almost 2 months later on Thursday, March 28th at 5 p.m. Please make sure to note that deadline of Thursday, March 28th is a hard and fast deadline. All applications must be completed and submitted through our annual grant system, which is a portal. No exceptions will be made. That portal will shut at 5 p.m. So please be sure that you are getting in all of your application components by that deadline. We do this in fairness to all other folks that are submitting by that deadline, so no exceptions will be made. We also like to note that successful applicants are those who put in meaningful time drafting their application well before the application deadline, giving themselves a chance to read through the guidelines, ask questions, and address any concerns. If you need accommodations due to a disability or translation services, please contact me to communicate your needs ahead of time, or you may visit our website and complete a form if you choose to or prefer to go that route. Requests made after the application deadline cannot be honored, so please be sure to let us know if you need any help. Now we will jump into eligibility for organizations. The key criteria for organizations is you must be headquartered in the Richmond and Tri-Cities region. You must be a nonprofit organization with a 501c3 tax-exempt status. You must have a 12-character unique entity ID, also known as a UEI, from SAM.gov. Please note that if you do not have one, it's a 2-part process. You do not need to complete the full the process through the federal portal. You just need to get to the process of getting the UEI number. Please also note that this is absolutely free to get. There are some websites that offer to do this for you for a fee. You do not need to do that. So just please make sure if you have any questions to contact me, and I'm happy to walk you through that process. In line with our federal funding, organizations cannot be disbarred, suspended, or have any other exclusions from receiving federal funds. Additionally, organizations must have a mission or strategic plan that includes a clear focus on arts and culture. The application must be submitted for the organization identified and not a pass-through to other entities, meaning if you are applying for the grant, that this will benefit your organization and you are the lead organization on the proposal. You also must not discriminate in hiring of staff or exclusions of audiences, artists, or other volunteers. And most importantly, and we will talk through this many times throughout the presentation, the use of funding is for July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. This is a 1-year project grant. For artists, eligibility includes being a practicing artist, and CultureWorks defines this as an individual who is recognized by their peers, critics, or other professionals as committed to producing art on a regular basis. This may mean that they're typically paid for their work, earning a portion of their living from their creative work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be the case. We have changed our definition from professional artists to practicing artists to hopefully be more inclusive of those who previously felt that they didn't qualify under the term professional artists. Artists of all disciplines are encouraged to apply. You'll see here we list performing, visual, literary, media, but that certainly doesn't mean that it's only those disciplines. So please do not consider that to be an exhaustive list. Artists must also maintain a residence in the Richmond and Tri-Cities region with the expectation to do so throughout the grant period. We require this as we're asking you to make an impact on the community with your project, and to fully engage with the grant, you will need to be here to do so. Applicant must have at least a 2-year history of public or community engagement, presentation, or publication. That can be very open-ended. So if you feel like those words don't necessarily resonate with you, please talk to me, and I'm sure that we can find a way that you qualify. Be a lead artist in every aspect of their project. You can certainly have collaborators, but again, you will be the one who is spearheading your project and responsible for its execution. You must be 18 years old or older, and students pursuing any degree are not eligible. You also must produce arts and culture that benefit and focus primarily on the Richmond and Tri-Cities region. You can certainly work with localities outside of the Richmond and Tri-Cities region, but this grant opportunity is meant to primarily benefit our region. You must be a U.S. citizen with a Social Security number. That again is tied to our federal funding. If you have someone that you'd like to work with that may not fall into those categories, please talk to me, as we certainly do not want to exclude anyone. And just as organizations, you cannot be disbarred, suspended, or have any other exclusions or disqualifications from receiving federal funding. This is also a 1-year project grant for artists, with funds needing to be used from July 1, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. Additional eligibility for both artists and organizations is to be mindful that multi-year grants will not be considered. Grants will not be awarded for similar activities for more than 2 years, and we can jump into that later. Applicants with incomplete or outstanding grant applications or past due reports are not eligible to apply. Timely reports are an essential part of our grants process and are seriously considered by panelists during award deliberations. This is something that comes up in panel convenings and can be a determining factor of receiving an award if someone was very late in completing a report or did not complete a report at all. So please be sure that you are ready to complete reports should you have receive an award. And if you are past due, please make sure that you are completing that before applying. Lastly, grants will not be awarded to 2 or more parties for the same project or program. Collaborative efforts will need to determine one lead artist or organization that will be responsible for the application, the execution of the project, and disbursement of funds, as well as reporting. So I'd like to stop here shortly to see if anyone has questions about what we've covered so far, specifically about eligibility. For example, one question we get is, why are students exempt from the opportunity? Students are ineligible as they typically do not have that history of community engagement or presentation that we are seeking. And they're also pursuing a degree that rightfully takes most of their time. So that's just one example of something that we could cover here. So please either put any questions you have in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself, and we'll stop here for about 5 minutes or so.
We got a question from Elizabeth Kilpatrick. Question is, does that student prohibition only apply to artists?
Nope, that would be anyone who's the lead on the application. But if you have kind of a nuanced question with that, Elizabeth, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
We have another one from Alyssa Solomon. Question is, can you speak to impact in our community with examples of past awardees?
That's a great question, Alyssa. We will be covering that very shortly with examples. So I believe that that question will be answered, but if not, please do speak up at the next Q&A portion and we could talk more. And I see how is community engagement defined. That's also something that we'll be covering in the next portion. Ashley, I'm curious about your capacity for funding this fiscal year. How big is the scope of opportunity? I know you said it varies from year to year. So Ashley, that's a great question. Thank you. We are still funding for this cycle. So I know that we at the very least have 100,000 to put towards this, but it will likely be more. Can you please clarify what you mean by multi-year grants? So that means that, for example, we are not going to fund past 1 year project. So whatever you're proposing needs to be accomplished in just 1 year of the fiscal year from July 1, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. So if you're proposing a project timeframe longer than that, that would not be eligible for this opportunity. I design and sell clothing. Would that be applicable as a practicing artist? Yes, Samantha, that would be. Something will come up later in this presentation, sort of around that, and we could talk through that, but yes, that is eligible. Are there ways to reason why, as a student, a person would need the grant, especially based on the project being pursued, or is that a hard guideline? Would you mind further elaborating on that, Zaki, if I'm pronouncing that right? I'm not sure I'm understanding your question there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a bit poorly worded, but I meant that as in, for example, for my case, I'm trying to do a theater-based project that's very based in the community engagement around Richmond. That is the goal. But there's no way for me to do that project without additional funds that I know my school can't apply, which is why I am attempting to go through this grant process now. And the project is theater based. It's community driven. I plan on bringing in a lot of community members, but because of me being a student, it seems that I'm like not able to be eligible for this specific grant, which I was hoping to see if that could be reasoned as like maybe. Yeah.
Sure. Well, why don't we talk more about that after the presentation and see what we can do to help you with the project.
Okay, thank you. That sounds great.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll take this last question from Chris, and then we're going to move on, but we'll have more opportunities to ask questions. Does CultureWorks support individual artists in connecting with organizations to implement grant program ideas? Yes. And that will come up further in the presentation too. And Chris, if that does not answer your question when we get to those parts, please just let me know.
Thank you. That does.
Okay, wonderful. So now we're going to dive into the details of our focus areas, which it seems like we are on the right track, as that's where a lot of your minds are headed. We have 2 focus areas: building capabilities and cultural equity. Applicants will select only one focus area when applying for funding. To talk first about building capabilities. So this is for specific opportunities that enable an artist or organization's effectiveness, overall growth, and longevity. Requests are made for a particular initiative or project. So for artists, this is not a fellowship, and for organizations, this is not considered general operating support. It's tied to a specific project. Sample organization initiatives that may be eligible for this funding include building infrastructure, improving technology, and strategic planning. So to give you an example, last year an organization used their building capabilities funding to support the repair of harps to playing condition to meet student demand for their programming. And a local theater used it for new lighting equipment in their theater. For artists, some funding that may be eligible under building capabilities is also building infrastructure such as studio space improvements, equipment to increase productivity and output or preparing for exhibits, and improving technology related to your specific art discipline or to explore a new one. And to give you some examples there, artist projects included funds to build a yurt in order to build the capacity for show productions and audience growth in the Richmond region, and to support the development of a new artist-run studio in Petersburg, designed for artists to create and maintain their practice and serve artists' needs as professionals. Another theater group used this to buy an iPad and a Square reader to take payment for their performances. So these are just examples. They are not all inclusive, but just to give you a sense of how people are using their building capabilities funds. New this year for organizations, building capabilities grants are limited to 30% of an organization's annual budget, up to a maximum of $20,000. This was previously capped at $15,000, and artists are limited to a maximum of $6,000. For cultural equity, this is about supporting arts and culture programming that reach underrepresented communities, and we'll talk about what that might mean. A goal and commitment of ours at CultureWorks, supported through this area, is to champion efforts that create accessible arts and culture opportunities and that remove barriers to maximize participation across our region. Some sample activities that may be eligible for funding for organizations include staff salary costs to support the idea of your project that engage underrepresented audiences in arts and culture programming, artist stipends for art events that highlight and promote the arts and culture of a particular community underrepresented in the region, and facilities costs for the arts programming that serves the community that you're identifying. For example, last year, an organization was funded to support its art programs for vulnerable women incarcerated and recovering from addiction and abuse, while another organization was supported in expanding its service area from Richmond to the Tri-Cities for its literacy programming serving historically under-resourced youth in Hopewell and Petersburg. For artists, some sample activities that may be eligible for this funding include innovative ideas that engage an underrepresented audience in arts and culture, as well as art exhibitions, engagements, events, presentations, anything of that nature that highlight and promote the arts and culture of a particular community that's underrepresented in our region. For example, last year, one artist was supported in a multimedia exhibit where Black fathers write letters of unsaid words and unexpressed emotions to their children. And another received funding for a documentary film that sought to reframe America's history by uncovering the hidden contribution of Black and Indigenous Americans in our nation's origin story. So those are just some examples. They are not all inclusive. Again, for organizations, grants are limited to 30% of an organization's annual budget, up to a maximum of $20,000, and artists are limited to a maximum of $6,000. Here we are talking about what we mean by underrepresented populations and the target communities that you seek to serve under your cultural equity grant. Here we have a list that is not exhausted by any mean and is meant to be broad so that you yourself can define what underrepresented communities you wish to serve through your project. It's important that when you write your grant application, you make a case for why this population is under-resourced, underserved, and not rely on generalizations. We want to understand your reasoning for why you are choosing to engage with this specific community. So here you'll see this list as a jumping off point, but again, it is not an exhaustive list, and you can share with us why you want to work with this community. To talk about some allowable costs for organizations under the opportunity. It could be used for salary support as it pertains to the proposed programming. Fees or stipends for artists or contractual personnel, again, only in support of services that they're providing for specific grant opportunities. Marketing and promotion costs of the proposed program, and you may use up to 10% towards indirect costs for your organization. For artists, this will be used in support of artist fees or stipends to you or others to support the services that they're providing for the specific grant program and activities. We encourage you to make sure that you pay yourself for your work. We value an artist's time and believe that you should be fairly compensated for your time to engage with your project and the community. You may also use this for contract service and professional fees, studio rental time, and marketing and promotion. And again, this is considered a stipend to you for grant activities undertaken or completed. Unallowable costs are considered artist relief programs where the funding is intended to alleviate financial hardship, such as rent or food assistance or lost revenue, alcoholic beverages, social activities such as receptions, parties, or galas, commercial enterprises or activities, including concessions, food, clothing, or other items for resale, and rental costs for home office workspace owned by individuals or an organization. You'll see a bit of a longer list on our guidelines, but I really don't think it'll be anything that anyone's facing. It includes things like land purchases, but please just make sure that you're checking out that so that you don't run into any issues. And we'll stop here to see if anyone has questions specifically about our focus areas and those allowable costs. For example, one question we get is, what do you mean by the commercial enterprises or activities? And that's meant to say that grant funding will not support you, for example, in buying inventory to stock your shelves with an item for the purpose of only resale. You can certainly sell your artwork or the clothing that you're created that's producing during the grant period. What you create is certainly yours to do with what you will. So hopefully that clears up any confusion there. So I will stop here for about 5 minutes to see if anyone has questions. We'll look at the chat box, and please also.
May I ask a question by voice?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So our organization is like 12 years old, and we have been doing a lot of programs and things. So I think we kind of have a track record as an organization. However, our organization is all volunteer and has an operating budget of like $0. So does 30% of $0 would be also $0. So are we eligible to apply for a grant? Because we don't earn any salaries or anything. It's entirely volunteer.
Yes, you're still eligible.
Oh, okay. But for organizations, like, how would that policy apply to us if it's, did I misunderstand the 30% thing?
I think it's something we should talk about after the presentation, but you are eligible, and we could talk through how that would work.
Okay, terrific. I might not be able to stay on the whole time, but I can reach out by email maybe if that's okay.
Yep, and this is also being recorded, so you can finish watching the presentation if you'd like.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
Thanks. I see in the chat, would hiring a director be eligible for a performing artist? Yes. For building capabilities, it sounds like a particular initiative proposed does not have to be related to a specific event. That's correct. Does it make a stronger application if the artist has a specific opportunity already secured, like an exhibition or performance? So we'll get into that too, Sarah. And I believe the more details and commitments that you're able to share do make for a stronger, more competitive application. Not about the focus area, but the 30% cap. I'm curious if you can talk about what to do if you're a new organization and don't have much, if any, revenue for the most recently completed fiscal year. In my case, it would not allow me to get almost anything. Maybe. Okay. Elizabeth, I feel like you're in the same boat as Dawn, and I will talk to you about that, but you certainly are eligible. In the past, you wanted to support new efforts and not to provide support for the same program year after year. How does that stand now? Do requests need to be for a program that is different from the one that was supported last year? So yes, it doesn't have to be an entirely new program, but we just want to make sure that there's a fresh perspective and that you're implementing lessons learned from past grants, incorporating enhancements, it doesn't have to be entirely new, but we just want to see that there are new elements to the project. So I hope that answers your question, Diane. Okay, so we will have still have opportunities for questions, but I'm going to move ahead. So now we'll discuss how to apply. You will visit our website at richmondcultureworks.org/grants. Like I said, guidelines are available now with applications opening Thursday, February 1st at 9 a.m. You will download and read those guidelines, and we encourage you to really make sure that you are understanding them and using them as a resource while you prepare your application and you're aligning your submission with our program's goals. You'll access our online application through our portal. If you have applied with us in the past, you'll sign into an existing account. If not, you'll register, which is in the top right corner of the webpage. You will take an eligibility quiz, which goes through most of what we talked about today, just making sure that you reside here, that arts and culture is at the forefront of your project. And that will allow you to go into the actual application to complete all tasks and uploads, and then you will review and submit the application. For organizations, you will complete all narrative fields. Questions are outlined in the guidelines, but not as comprehensive as the application. So we're giving you the high-level theme in the guidelines, but the questions are not in the guidelines. For attachments, you'll upload your current fiscal year budget, financial statements, a board list with affiliations, and supplemental information. That can include things like videos, newsletters, annual reports, anything to showcase and exemplify your organization. For artists, you will also complete all narrative fields, and you'll upload your required attachments, such as your practicing artist resume or CV, a portfolio that includes samples of your artwork, and a description of those pieces submitted. For collaborative projects, we ask that you please consider, if you're choosing to work with schools or complete a public art project, that you be mindful of their own approval processes, and that sometimes those take considerable time. So just be mindful if you're working in that space, and that you're also getting documentation that the project has been approved by the parties that you're working with. You will determine one eligible lead artist or organization to be the applicant that's responsible for the project. And again, they will disperse funds to partners and will be required on the progress to report on the progress of the project. You will also ask these collaborators to define their partnership and how they will assist you in the grant project, and explain how they will be managed. An example of providing evidence of commitment is given here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a letter on official agency letterhead. It could be an email. It's just something that we want to know that your partners are committed to working with you on this project, and that they're going to help you be successful in accomplishing your grant activities. Now we will talk about review criteria. And this is what our panelists use to review your applications and how they score against these different categories. So we ask that you please make sure your narrative is addressing the review criteria. These are covered in depth in the guidelines, but today we're going to give you a high-level look at these categories. And to just give you an understanding of how this works, to review and award grants, CultureWorks has peer-led panels that are made of comprised of local artists, arts and culture administrators, business leaders, community stakeholders, all with diverse backgrounds, experience, and relevant expertise. And they do remain anonymous to the public, but they're internally vetted for their knowledge of the arts and culture sector and competency in scoring applications. So just so you are aware, myself and anyone else at CultureWorks is not responsible for making the funding decisions. We're here to guide the process and to help you in managing your grant. So here we have capacity is what we'll talk about first. Again, these are high-level views of the review criteria. And when crafting your responses for the application, just keep these in mind. Capacity for organization is the extent to which the applicant aligns its projects with its stated mission and how the project supports the organization's current and future needs. For artists, this is about the impact of grant funding on advancing your vision as an artist and achieving your project goals and contributing to your artistic growth. For audience development, this is about considering community involvement of the applicant and their plans to engage with their intended audience. For artists, this is about efforts to enhance the appreciation of their art form, along with community involvement and plans to promote the project to their intended audience. For artistic and cultural excellence, for organizations, this is about the alignment of the applicant's offered programs and services with its missions and goals. For artists, this is about demonstrating a body of artwork and showcasing past community engagement, whether that might be through exhibits, programming, presentations, or other things. For artistic and cultural merit, this is about assessing the extent to which the applicant's request aligns with CultureWorks' overall desired impacts in the region, as defined in our strategic plan. And our plan is available on our website and in the guidelines, but it will also be linked in the grant application where it asks you about responding to this question. For management and accountability, this is about considering the capacity of the applicant to meet the proposed project objectives and that they have a carefully developed and realistic budget for the proposed work. And for cultural equity, this is only for folks applying in that area, that focus area. This is about the degree to whether your program or project authentically engages with an underrepresented community that you are identifying to achieve the goal of increasing access to arts and culture. So we'll stop here to see if anyone has questions specifically about collaborative project or the review criteria. For example, one question we get is, how do you handle a panelist that may be involved in the work of an artist or organization? And if a panelist is deeply involved with an artist or organization, they self-disclose that relationship ahead of the review process. They will not review or score that application, and they will also recuse themselves from the discussion in order to maintain the fairness in the conversation. So I will see if anyone has something that they have in the chat box, or please unmute yourself. Can the application be completed in stages rather than one sitting? Yes. So as long as you're saving your work in the portal, it'll be there for you to continue working on. Just please make sure you get it in by that deadline. All right, I'm going to move ahead, but please just keep putting your questions into the chat box. We are nearing the end of our time, and I just wanted to give you some key elements of building a successful grant. We ask you to be as clear and detailed as possible in the project and to have a financially sound project, meaning that your budget and your narrative are supporting one another and speak to one another, that whatever is in your budget is also explained in your narrative, so that no costs are seemingly coming out of nowhere, and a project that could be easily envisioned by the panelists. That sort of speaks to our last, one of our last questions that we had about if it's helpful to have a confirmed partner. Certainly is. It gives a sense of buy-in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, but I think it does make for a more competitive application. Some helpful tips is to read and follow the guidelines. I know that we keep talking about that, but those documents are there to be helpful, so please use them. To use plain language. It makes it easier for the panel to read and understand and envision your work, and hopefully not get too technical necessarily if there's something that is specific about your art form that not everyone might be able to understand. A clear and concise picture of yourself or organization. Be sure to explain who you are. Even if you're well known in our community, take the time to share information about yourself or organization and convey your mission and accomplishments. A detailed project description, a practical timeline of activities. As a reminder, this is a 1-year project, so be mindful of your capacity to manage grant activities within that time frame. Have a reasonable budget. Make sure that it's sensible and, again, speaks to your application. Have a defined target audience. Remember to make a case for who you're working with and why you specifically want to engage with this community. A competent project team. It's important that you trust your team and their capacity to help you fulfill all grant activities and get your project to the end. And to provide work samples that really showcase who you are, show the panelists what your work is, and speak to why you're an asset to our community. We also encourage you to have a friend or family member or teammate read through your application draft, as having an outside reader will help to make sure that your application is clear and consistent in its messaging. If you are accepting a grant award, CultureWorks will provide you with a W-9 form, and you will fill that out complete with your UAI number, which is only for organizations. The UEI number is only needed for organizations. You'll complete a document assuring agreement and compliance with our terms and conditions, which really is talking about reporting and use of funds. As a reminder, grant funds must be used for the purpose described in your proposal. Any changes or modifications to the purpose must be reported to CultureWorks in advance. And we understand that the scope of work may change from the time you submit in March to when you're awarded in June, and that's okay. We just ask that you let us know about any major changes. So this could be changing the purpose of the project, changing a project site that's really crucial to the grant, staff changes that people who are helping to carry out the grant activities. Anything like that, please let us know. And again, as a reminder, the timeline to use this grant funding is July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. A mid-year progress report will be due, as well as a final report, and you will complete those on our online portal again. And as a reminder, reporting is a valuable tool to CultureWorks that we can stay informed of your progress, but also for you to share if you're experiencing any challenges with your project so that we can help you. You'll also make sure to acknowledge CultureWorks on any material associated with your funding project. And if you are awarded federal funds, which you will be notified of, you will also acknowledge the National Endowment for the Arts. I know we covered a lot of content here today. You are a part of this session that we're recording. This will be available on our website, so you can come back to visit the presentation. And the application, again, is going to be open as of February 1st. It's closing March 28th. Please make a note of those deadlines and let us know if you need any accommodations ahead of those deadlines. And this will be our last Q&A section. This is for more general or quick questions about the grants program and what we covered here today. If you have more in-depth questions about your proposed project, I have virtual office hours that you can sign up for a time, or you can contact me after the presentation. And I just ask that you make sure that you're reading through those grant guidelines and coming to our time together with questions ahead of time, so we can make best use of your appointment. And here is my contact information. And it's also available on our website, as well as with the link to sign up for those virtual office hours. So I will stop here to look at the chat box and to also see if anyone wants to ask anything directly. Anna asked, is UEI the same as EIN? No, it is not, Anna. UEI is something that the federal government, through sam.gov, you can get your UEI number there. It's a unique entity ID. It's a two-part process, but you only need to complete the first part for our purposes. It's completely free to get. We have federal funding, which is a requirement to give it out. If you need help with the directions, please just let me know. And Sarah asked, I applied a few years ago and remember that at the time applicants could receive feedback on their application if they submit it before a specific date. Is that still the case? Yes, Sarah. Happy to take a look at your application. I can review it, in terms of if it's aligning with our guidelines and give you some insight into our grant review, but ultimately, like we covered, panelists will be the ones who are scoring and the applications and ultimately making the funding decisions. Yes, Chris.
Yes, I had another question, a follow-up question. I asked about the connection process to organizations as an individual artist. And then when we talked a little bit later, you shared that it makes for a stronger application for there to already be buy-in. That process of conversation happen prior to submission of the application, or would that be something that we could talk about post application submission and figuring out how we would implement the idea?
So both are the case. I mean, we would want to make sure that whatever you're proposing in the application, you're able to do, if you're funded, that there is some type of confirmation of a partner, or that you're able to accomplish it on your own. Or maybe you already have a partner, but you're looking to implement your project with additional partners, something like that. So conversations can certainly be ongoing. But I will say, folks who have submitted like letters of support or a partner sharing, like that example, a letter saying that they are committed to the project and helping you by providing, whether it's like space or equipment, or just being, an additional project lead, is very helpful for the panel to know that to have confidence that this project is going to go forward.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Alyssa asked, would you speak to full versus partial funding for grant requests, particularly in light to artists building capabilities? Also, would you speak to expectations to applicants bringing funds other than CultureWorks to propose project? So those are great questions, Alyssa. Our panel has the opportunity to either full or partially fund grant requests. Last year, we had a smaller pot of money, so it was raised at multiple panel discussions. Do we just fund some of the top applications fully, or would we rather spread the money that we do have and partially fund more people? And that decision for many of the panels was to partially fund more applicants so that more people would have access to funds to make their projects happen. So that varies from year to year, but that's up to panel discretion. And in terms of expectations to bring funds other than CultureWorks to the project, there is no expectation requirement. It's certainly something that panelists would be happy to see, but it doesn't necessarily disqualify you. There's no requirement on CultureWorks to have other outside sources of funding. Well, I know we are nearing the end of our time here, and thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about the grants program. Please feel free to reach out to me by email or sign up for an office hour session. I'm happy to talk to you about project ideas or specific questions about the application, anything that's going to help you move through the process as best as possible, I'm here to help. So just let me know how I can help you, and I hope that you all are able to submit to our 2024 cycle. Thank you so much.